I joke I'm like a 12th culture kid because I just grew up in so many different places, and everywhere we moved also felt like a adventure. But as I got older, I started to feel it more. I moved to New York City and everyone would ask me where I was from. I didn't have like a really honest, short answer. There were always these like little things that made me feel quite different. I didn't feel like I belonged for a long time. Brene Brown wrote a book called like The Secrets of Imperfection. There's a quote that's about belonging to yourself. And when I read that, it gave me the chills because I think as I've gotten older, and a huge part of the practice of mental fitness is about knowing, caring for, and grounding who you are, regardless of where you're living, regardless of what space you're in or where you're working. Like I've learned how to know who I am and what I need, and then care for that, and then ground myself regardless of my environment. So I've learned how to feel like I belong to myself. And that's a really different than needing to belong. Now I have my own versions of communities, right? Like we're tribal animals, so that's important.
Hi, my name is Rainy, and you're listening to the Space Whispering podcast. Today, our guest is Lissy, and she's a creator of MYNDY. She is so delightful. She is full of energy. She comes very present into everything she does. I met her at a Women's in Tech event, wellness, focus on wellness. We did yoga together as a group, and then she was part of the 3 panelists. I was very attracted to her energy and her thoughtfulness when she was giving her advice to the women in that space. I think what she's sharing is so precious. So please take the time to listen to this episode and also look into what she's offering. I think it would help you understand who you are more, to slow down or to accelerate, but based on your needs. Thank you for tuning in. Besitos. Hi, Lissy.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. I just went on a run and showered, so I feel like pretty fresh.
You look beautiful.
Thank you. So do you.
I met you after yoga. So it's a different, now I see you again after running, so.
Yeah.
And talking about like movement and yoga, I know you focus on wellness and you do a lot of work behind that. How did you, why, what motivated you?
Yeah. So I think a lot of things, like I always wish I could say it was like one specific moment. But like so many stories, I feel like there's just like so many parts to it. When I was young, I think that a lot of people know, even as adults, like if they feel a little stressed or a little anxious, maybe they could go back into childhood and notice what those feelings were. Like my childhood challenging emotion was stress. Like when I was little, I was always procrastinating and stressed about getting my homework assignments in on time and things like this. But thought that was like kind of normal. And then I went to college, had a lot of like, again, stressful moments, and thought that was like a really normal emotion to feel, which it is. All of us are stressed. The majority of primary care visits have to do with stress. But yeah, and then I started to notice that when I would run, I would feel less stressed. And then I always say like, it was when I graduated from college that it was the first time my stress started to impact my physical health in a way that I knew about anyway. And I went to JPMorgan, a bank, was working there after school, and was super stressed all the time. My stomach was hurting. I went to therapy. I went to the gym a lot. I was starting to run races, and that helped a lot. But I thought maybe I'll switch workplaces and see if that makes a difference in the way that I feel. So then I went to an ed tech company that went from 40 to 1,000 people in 3 years. Crazy. I was traveling all the time. My stress got worse. My stomach got worse. Like, I was getting tested for celiac and all of these kinds of things back in the day. And the doctor was like, we don't know what's wrong with you. And at the time, there wasn't that like same, conversation happening around stress and its impact on the body. And so I ended up leaving that company to go to MIT to build a quantitative research-backed model to fix companies, thinking companies were causing us to feel not so good.
Wow.
And then I was a company fixer, taking care of myself, I should say. I had like a lot more tools to take care of myself at this time. So, in addition to my workout routine and making sure I was sleeping well, making sure I was eating better, um, when I was stressed, I was taking breaks and going on walks and things like this. Um, but I found that even when you fix companies, people within them are still stressed. And so I feel like what I didn't fully appreciate growing up and what I think about when I hear wellness is like, I think I always thought I was practicing wellness because I was doing a lot of things to help myself feel better. But there was always this underlying issue around what I call mental wellness challenge, which is stress, which is kind of like a low grade fever. So it's like trying to fix, all of these like topical issues when like at the root of this all for me was like learning how to work with and manage my stress. Because not all stress is bad. That's that's how I started working in the space. It's a very long and winding story.
No, I like it. It's interesting the way that you went through so many things and you were basically like pointing out like, okay, it might be this, and you tackled that. And then, okay, it might be so this adventurous and kind of like seeking and exploration. I think a lot of people don't allow themselves to do that type of exploration, and to eventually end up like, hey, this is working for me. Maybe it can help other people. So you went inward eventually, right?
That's right. Exactly.
I I'm thinking about this because when you were hopping through companies, were you living in different cities? So
Yes.
you're moving. Okay.
Oh, yeah. So I grew up moving every 2 to 3 years for my entire life. So I have lived in Japan, Taiwan, and graduated from high school in Thailand, and then moved all over the United States. So lived in California, Michigan 3 different times, uh, Chicago, suburbs of Chicago 2 times, upstate New York, and then a bunch of places all over New York City, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Boston, Massachusetts. So um, yeah, I've always been moving. And as a kid, I used to think that that helped me, and it did. I mean, like it was like pretty meaningful. I think, where I'm sure going to talk about what mental fitness is and how to practice it. But like I was accidentally practicing a lot of mental fitness just by being in new spaces and being in new environments around new people. Um, and I think that's even as I got older and I was again going through these like very stressful periods, I think every new location almost brought like a fresh perspective to not only like my life, but like the challenges that I was facing around my health and feeling good.
Wow. I see you like, when you move a lot, you don't feel like that you belong anywhere. At least is my experience personally.
Yeah.
And I wonder if moving, even though it sounds exciting, like all these places you lived and visited, there's also some stress because there's different cultures. And so who are you? Who is Lissy in these countries, in these places, or even cities, even if it's the same country like the US, but every city has its own like language, not only physical,
Totally.
but even spoken. Um, how did you deal with that?
Yeah. So I think there's like two parts to the question, which is like, who are you when you've moved in different places? And then how did I deal with that? I
Yes.
think the first one's so interesting because um, so there's a term for people like me, and it's third culture kids. Kids who, if you grew up in one place and then you move to another, you almost live in between those two places in your own made up culture that's kind of taking bits and pieces from both. For me, I joke I'm like a 12th culture kid because I just grew up in so many different places. Um, and I think growing up, for the most part, I mean, my parents always talked about it as a very positive thing. And I had a really great childhood and I learned how to love it because we got good at being new and learning about new places. And everywhere we moved also felt like a adventure. But as I got older, I started to feel it more. Like when I moved to New York City and everyone would ask me where I was from, I didn't have like a really honest, short answer. Um, and then, I used to speak Japanese. I took it in college. And, um, everyone was always like, oh, you never took Spanish. Like that's like a little thing. Or, oh, like, I choose the foods that I wanted to eat out when we were eating out. And it was typically, I was geared towards East Asian food, which is what I grew up with every time, and everyone's like, why? Can we switch it up? And it was just like, there were always these like little things that made me feel quite different. And I didn't feel like I belonged for a long time. And it's as cheesy as it is. Brene Brown wrote a book called like The Secrets of Imperfection or something like that. And there's a quote that's about belonging to yourself, and that's what like growing up is all about. And when I read that, it gave me the chills because I think as I've gotten older, and a huge part of the practice of mental fitness is about knowing, caring for, and grounding who you are, regardless of where you're living, regardless of what space you're in or where you're working. And while that can sound like a little amorphous, and I'm happy to get more specific, like I've learned how to know who I am and what I need, and then care for that, and then ground myself regardless of my environment. So I've learned how to feel like I belong to myself. And that's a really different than needing to belong. Now I have my own versions of communities, right? Like we're tribal animals. So that's important. So, I've got my family. That's one of my tribes. We're very close. I've got my wonderful grad school friends. I've got a couple women entrepreneurship communities that I'm a part of, which is fantastic. I've got, groups that I'm involved with in athletics. So I'm a terrible runner, but I have a great attitude. So I've got my running buddies. But I think I find the community portion and feeling of connection with other separately from connection with myself and belonging. And then I think, like I said, it was hard to move. And I noticed it was harder as I got older, because as you get older, everyone wants to put you in a box. And I have this amazing friend who I met a very long time ago. And he said this one time, he's talking about a friend of his. And he said, they're trying to put me in a box and I'm too big for that. I don't fit. And I just love that. And anytime I feel like someone's trying to put me in a box, and whether that's like while I'm fundraising for the business, or, I meet them and they make assumptions about who I am, or that I show up, with a good attitude because I was born like this and I wake up like this, which I don't. I do a lot of work on myself. I just remember that I don't fit. And it's okay that they don't know that, because that's how the brain works. We want to categorize people,
Mhm. That is one of the hardest things growing up, even today, where I'm speaking with someone and I'm trying to explain something, and they immediately get out their box and put me in there, right?
Yeah.
Or they completely ignore it, right? And suddenly it's like their brain cannot compute what I'm explaining, and they like forget about it, like moving on, like nothing happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is where understanding that our brains are pattern makers and repeaters. We're looking for patterns because it saves us cognitive energy if we can very easily categorize a person or a thing. And so for someone like you and me, who don't necessarily fit in one box, we're confusing and we're cognitively expensive for people. They have to spend real time. And if people don't have time, they don't. So they want to shove you into one of those boxes. And I think my personal self work is that I'm building a whole company to help people work on that, and to expand their mind and expand their cognitive capabilities, so that they can create space for conversations and understanding with people who are different and things that are different. And I've learned that it's also my job to learn how to ground myself and help myself feel good in those moments when someone accidentally makes me feel, uh, cognitively expensive for them, or annoying is another way to say that.
I like that word, cognitive expensive, because, we move a lot around money and time, money and
Yeah.
time, money and time. It seems like those are our resources, and sometimes we get them confused. but using it for our brain and for our health, I think it's very powerful. And people will immediately understand it. So beautiful. I'm glad you use that in your business and your growth. I do want to say about your name, like Lucy,
Yeah.
moving around so much, like how did it feel? And, how did you express it? Like your name, how was it growing up in all these places?
Do you know that in my whole lifetime, I've never been asked that question before?
Mm.
Not one time. And it's a good one because it's important because no one says my name correctly, um, ever. And what's interesting is, so I'm a twin, and my twin is like my everything. I love her so much. My parents were fraternal, and they named us Lauren and Alyssa, Elissa, because they wanted us to have very different identities. They didn't want us to be, too twinny. Um, and the second I was born, my brothers couldn't say Alyssa, so they called me Lissy. So we very quickly became Lissy and Lauren, the Alden twins. Now she's tan skin, green eyes, brown hair. Our personalities are very different. And I always wondered, like, with the name Lauren, like she always had a name that people could pronounce and they recognized it immediately. With my name, everybody used to say Lizzie or Lindsay, like they didn't even read it. So similar to the you fit in a box, like they're like, I see an L and I see a Y. So it must be the name Lizzie. And I've had people challenge me, telling me my name's not right, or that it's not a real name. So like I've had a lot of people say like, there's no way that's your real name. And my formal name is Alyssa, but I don't even respond to it. Like nobody calls me that. And then when we lived in Asia, the letters Lissy, like that, if I just think about like even in Taiwan, they pronounced it Lucy. And so I think like in a lot of ways, I've had to become increasingly flexible with, again, like when you talk about identity, like I love my name. It's part of who I am, but like I respond to a lot of other things. In my family, we all have nicknames. And what's been so interesting is my twin sister she moved to Israel 5 years ago. And it was the first time her name had ever been said differently. So they call her Loren there instead of Lauren. Very pretty. Like, love that.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
But it's funny because we call it her alter ego. And so you can appreciate this as well. I'm sure we were talking about your name. You said I can call you Rainy, but I think, is it Rainy is another
Writing.
way to
Yeah,
describe
yeah,
or to
yeah,
pronounce this.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I know I'm not supposed to be asking you questions, but I have to. Like, how has it been for you?
Oh my gosh. I do have to say, I connect with you with your sister, the alter ego name, because I
Yeah.
had an alter ego name. I never said it a lot to my friends at the moment, but I, how do I explain this? My dad used to have like this, he loves music. So we were surrounded by music all the time,
Wow.
right? But somehow I got a hold of a cassette, and the artist was named Stephanie, and she had long blonde hair. So completely the opposite of me. And then in
Yeah.
school, there was two Stephanies that were very good friends of mine. So my alter ego is a Stephanie. And so I used to put a towel in my head and just dance and sing to her songs.
I love that.
Yeah, my childhood was spent me creating a lot. I created little
Um,
worlds, but my name in school, for example, just to explain, even in any country, speak Spanish speaking, you know, every time they would say my name, no, before they would say my name, there was a pause always the first day of class. So
oh,
they would pronounce
interesting.
every student's name, and then there was a pause. Immediately, I would lift my hand up and say, "Me, you can call me Rainy or Rainy." And because my full name is Rainelina, Rainelina.
Pretty.
So my sister was 6 years old when she created this name, like when I was born. And so my mom allowed her to name me. And
Oh,
so So imagine no one. And it has an H. So the H is silent in Spanish, but in English it's not silent. So immediately people see that. And I was automatically lifting my hand. And they're like, oh, perfect. And they would scratch
Like,
my full name and put Rainy.
yeah.
They would be excited to not have to
Oh,
pronounce my name. So it's crazy. Like no one calls me my name by my name, my full name. Only a few like German, Swiss friends, which they
wow.
pronounce it very differently. But like from other countries, they want to call me this. Also, my friend from Belgium. It's so weird. Like the Europeans want to use my full name and they use it with their accents, and it's just like,
Oh,
oh, it warms my heart.
wow. That's amazing. And that's a beautiful name. And so cool your sister got to name you.
Yeah, she got to name me.
Wow.
She was an adult since she was little. Like she's just that
Oh,
type of person. Yeah. She's
that's
she's
so
she was
nice.
born an adult human. So
Wow.
thank you. Thank you. But in high school, I had a very artistic, like also musician, and he used to call me, "Hey Rainy Day, hey Rainy Day." And so
Oh,
I love that so much that I'm like, finally, I can use a collaboration, like something that people can understand with my name. So it doesn't matter if they don't remember, but like rainy, like it's raining outside, and so I can explain it because I can see people even if when I say my name, I can see their reactions, and so I would be like rainy day, like it's raining outside. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it.
love
So
it.
I thank this friend all the time in my
That's
mind.
so, so good. And also so powerful to have something visual associated with your name. Like I always have to say like Lizzie, but with S's. And people say
Mhm.
Lissy, and I'm like, Lissy, exactly. I have things that rhyme with my name, but you're very lucky to have, a very uh, visual explanation for how to say it.
Yeah. And I'm very visual, so it helps even me. And it makes it fun at the same time to see. Yeah. Talking about like, the way you speak and the way you communicate, you're very clear and detailed. I don't know if it's because of the cultures you live. Like, I know Japanese in Japan, they're very attentive to details, even like how you express yourself, how you move your hands, how you greet people. Like it's a very different culture. Do you think that influenced you?
I think it has to. And thanks for saying that. I think it has to. Like, when I think for a long time, I didn't necessarily know how to express myself fully, especially when I came to emotional topics. And I find that specificity helps with trust. It helps with visualization. So if you can be more specific, it helps other people create a picture of what you're talking about. And I also think you said when like we began, you said when I was younger, I was creating these worlds. And I think in a lot of ways, when I speak, I'm almost picturing the words in my head create a world. And so, um, yeah, I think it's just part of how like I express myself. And then I think it also helps me remember what's happening. It's very weird. It's like a lot of things.
Yeah, it is a lot of
Yeah.
things. And somehow I obviously understand you. And while you were speaking, I'm thinking about, yes, the letters, right? The way you mention it, even how you spell your name, like when you said Lissy, immediately it was like you were bringing into me your name, and I can see it as letters, right? And this, I'm thinking of the letters in Japan, right? They're so different
They're
than
so different.
so different. What did you do with that? How did you were able to like translate that visually and also mentally because you're very detailed. Um,
Yeah, I think for me, it was a long time ago. So I learned there's three like alphabets in Japanese. So there's hiragana, katakana, and kanji. Hiragana and katakana are specific to Japanese culture and language. Hiragana I like to think of as kind of like basic lettering. Um, I can't remember how many characters there are, but um, you basically have like vowels, so a, I, u, e, o, and then you have consonants mixed with vowels, so like kaki, kuke, ko, tachi, tute, to, ya, yu, yo. And every character, as a kid, they taught us individually with a visual. So even like you, I can still picture it. It's like a little goldfish. And I think the sentence associated was like, you catch the fish, right? So like as kids, I think we do a really good job of teaching um, or learning, but we teach children like how to do these things with visuals. And grownups, we almost like pretend that we don't need that anymore. But I think we need the same things. For katakana, it was the same. They're different letters. They actually mirror the same sounds as hiragana, but katakana is meant for English words spelled out in Japanese. For example, McDonald's is pronounced makudonorudo, and that would be written in katakana, not hiragana, because it's a word that's non-Japanese in tradition. Kanji is wild. So kanji was borrowed. I think most of the letters of kanji are borrowed from Chinese, traditional Chinese lettering. And those are, in so many ways, those were complicated. I think I had learned a total of like 250. There's 2,000 characters in kanji. And those are wild because you're almost trying to create meaning, just like I said, with like that U letter with the fish, but from these like much more complicated characters with many more lines. And some of them are very much look like the thing they're describing, but other ones don't. So like, yeah, it's kind of it's a wild one, but I think every time it was, can you connect the character to the sound or the meaning of the word?
Beautiful. So crazy how you explain this. This brings me back to your business, and I'm wondering how you use this knowledge, or even if you have, realized that the way you explain how you learn these languages and how they are, it's like little boxes. Like I see it like little boxes, little things that connect to each other. And I'm wondering if you bring that into your business and how, like, I don't even know how to unbox all of this, but if you feel called to say something, yeah.
Yeah, of course. The answer is yes. Like I think very specifically. So because I said I'm visual, when I meet a person, for example, and
Mhm.
oftentimes you say like, tell me about yourself. So they'll say, I'm from Nevada and, my name is X and I work in Y. My first question is, why are you living in Nevada? Like what brought you there? Right. Because I've never met, you don't meet people from Nevada very often who aren't from Las Vegas. And even then it's quite rare. And so in a lot of ways in my head, I'm trying to paint a picture of who this person is by grabbing the next most interesting or curious part of them. And when I thought about actually building MYNDY, it was kind of like that. It was like I had gone to MIT to build a quantitative research backed model to fix company culture. And then I went and fixed company cultures. Um, but but the thing I couldn't get over was that even when companies are really well structured and built, um, the people within them were still stressed. And instead of blaming work, they blamed everybody else. So I left the last company I worked for. So you can picture these boxes. I'm almost like walking. So I like did this box, and all of a sudden it was like, well, then how do you work on your mind so that it works for you? Like, how do you work on your stress? That's a huge box. I didn't know how to jump all the way over to this next lily pad, if you will. And so the biggest question for me at the time was like, what is confidence and how do you make sure you don't lose it when the wind blows? Because when I thought about the times I was most stressed, I felt at the time like I was lacking confidence. But going back to how people perceive you, I have always been perceived as very confident. So I'm 5'8", but I joke I have a 6'12" personality. I'm quite extroverted. So I have, and I have a strong voice and I'm not shy because I grew up moving and had to be out there. But I didn't feel confident a lot growing up. And I was always, people shared this with me like, oh, you're so confident, but it wasn't said with love. It was said kind of with judgment in a way. And so I decided to build a class, just like a really quick class on the science behind confidence, like I said, where it comes from. And what I learned, and I'll get back to the lily pad thing, but it will become quite clear, is that the psychologically repeatable concept of confidence is not self-esteem. It's not thinking that you're great. It's belief in your ability to do a task. And why that matters is because I was a confident person, because I always believed in myself to be able to learn well, because I always had to learn about people and places and things and blend in and pick up on classes and do all these things when I was switching environments as a kid. So I wasn't confident that I could make the NBA, if I tried out for basketball. But I was confident that I could, give a presentation because I had to stand up in front of big groups of people and introduce myself every year since I was a kid. So my question though was, what happens when you're confident or you believe in yourself to give a presentation, but then you bomb the presentation? It doesn't go well. Then what? So all of a sudden I took this really big lily pad, which is like, how do you work on your mind so that it works for you? I broke it into my next little step. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, if you bomb the presentation, then there's these thoughts that go through your head. And that's what we call optimism, or a lack of optimism. When bad things happen and you think that they're permanent, personal, and pervasive, which is a framework I learned. And I just kind of started putting these next stepping stones in front of me. And I think that's where it's like, when you think about learning Japanese, it's like, oh, how could you? Well, I learned hiragana as a kid, and then I learned katakana. And then I started learning kanji, and then I picked it back up in college, right? So all of a sudden there was some familiarity. And so I think learning a language, moving a lot, has all helped me realize that like life is just one big chunk of to-dos that we're constantly breaking into pieces. And then the idea is to ideally opt into the big chunks that you're most excited about breaking into pieces.
Beautiful, beautiful. I realize that you're so aware of other people that it's almost like you see the energy of their voice, like the current, right? When you speak. And it's almost like a graph, and you can see their intention behind what they're saying. So you're constantly super alert. You're constantly aware of your surroundings and other people. That is very interesting. That is very unique.
Thank you.
I can see why you are doing what you're doing. And why, like, tell me more about your business and why did you birth this new venture?
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for
That
saying
is,
that. Um, I really appreciate it. And I pick up on people, and that's exactly what happens. I feel like I can like kind of, I think there's like listening, and then there's like trying to understand. And I think I am always trying to understand. So I appreciate you calling that out. And I think,
it's you.
yeah.
Can I say something right away? Because it's almost not about understanding. It's because understanding, yes, is with the mind, but it's almost like you are connecting with them at a level that we don't see. So, but if we took a graph of sound, when you're like talking or editing a video, you can see the sound moving, right? This currents, this vibration. You're very tuned into vibration. That's
Yes.
yes,
Yes. And again, forgive me for this. But I think it's
yeah.
a good discussion. Like, I would argue like understanding a vibration of energy, or how someone's feeling and how they're doing, their emotions, the things you
Mm-hmm.
can't touch and feel, their thoughts that are, to your point, behind what they say. Like that to me is seeking like the deepest level of understanding of like the human condition. And so I feel like um it's a gift, but it's also why like New York City can sometimes be exhausting for me, because I am picking up that vibration on the subway and with the person I talk to at the grocery store. Like I know all of the people who work there, and the friends that I bump into and the strangers I pass on the street. So it's kind of a wild thing. And I think part of why that's important is because there's what we say and then there's what we mean. And I think our society says that like we like being busy and that stress is a part of our everyday and people perform better when they're under pressure. And a lot of that is true. But when you think about what's behind a lot of this language, it's I have to feel this way. It's the way it is that our society operates so that none of us can breathe and we're all traveling nonstop. And it's there is a there's a lot of research that shows that the words we choose to describe how we think, so not the words we say out loud, but the words we think, have a huge, huge impact on how we end up feeling. And if that's true, that what we're thinking has an impact on what we're feeling and what we're feeling has an impact on what we're doing, then technically everyone could hear that because it's physical energy that's being transformed. So it sounds like a little woo woo, but like if humans are, vibrating at the cellular level, all of us can hear that. It's about tuning in. And I think what was hard for me for a very long time was that I used to think all those things in my 20s, which is like, I have to feel this way. This is the way it is. If I could just switch jobs, if I can just do this differently, if it's just the weekend, I wish I could. Like there was all this language that went on in my head around thinking that I was a victim of my own thoughts and then the way the world operates. And what I learned in doing research on the brain and teaching this first class on confidence, but then learning that it's not just about confidence, it's about the thought patterns that we have when things go right and wrong, was that we all have a choice in the way that we show up and the things that we do, which can deeply impact what we think and how we feel. And so while I used to think that my thoughts were all true and that my feelings were all true and that those things should drive my behaviors, I'm having a bad day, I shouldn't go to the gym, I should be kind to myself, I actually could control the behavior, which for me, it's different for everybody. Going to the gym is the thing that makes me feel better. And it increases my clarity of thought, which then increases my consistency in mood. And so MYNDY started as like a research project. Like it was 8 months of doing research on the brain, trying to understand if this, then that, if this, then that, if this, then that. So it's that stepping stone mentality. And then I started teaching this framework around confidence, optimism, resilience, energy, heart, and focus. It's a quantitative model. So there's science and as I like to say, like there's an actual coming together of all of this. So you get a benchmark score and all that. And the number one piece of feedback I got, Rainey, was like, hold me accountable. Like, where do I do this mind work? And the answer I got in the short term was, well, you could go to a therapist, but that's kind of like saying that you need to eat better, so you should go to a doctor. It's like the doctor will help you come up with the right way to eat for whatever, subclinical, clinical, or, wellness need that you have. But they're not going to be there helping you pick out your food at the grocery store every day. Or you could go to the doctor and have them help you understand like how to work out your body when you've broken, an arm so that you still stay limber, but they're not at the gym with you. So the question is like, where is the gym for your mind? Like, where do you go to work on these things in a way that's strong, not weak for doing the work, that's proactive, not reactive, that's honestly cool? I don't know. And the thing I struggled a little with was that sometimes spirituality really served me. Sometimes religion, sometimes research, sometimes breathing, mindfulness, meditation. Like I did my first meditation retreat when I was in high school. I did my first yoga class when I was in like 4th grade. Like, I've had access to these tools, but it wasn't one thing that helped my mind. It was a bunch of things. And so really winding for you, but like at the end of the day, it was like, our thoughts matter. They're influenced by our behaviors. Where do you go to do these behaviors? I don't know. So now we're building a gym for your mind so that we can help you change your behaviors, to change your thoughts, to shift your feelings so that you can be and do your best every day, regardless of what you're trying to achieve, whether it's just more stable mood day to day, or you're trying to get a raise or promotion in your job.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So it's anyone at different level can use your tools, your system. And how does it work? How does it work? For example, if I'm new to it, like walk me through it.
Sure. So What's so cool is that the actual academic framework that sits underneath the technology we're building now is multitudinal. There's like so many different ways to use it. But what we've built today and what we're in the process of launching in like the next couple weeks is what we call a MYNDY mental fitness routine builder. So the idea is that we are typically most stressed in the morning. We have a cortisol spike in our body at that time. And it's a great opportunity for us to kind of set the tone for the day and most importantly for our mind. And so we've built a 10-minute routine based on the quantitative research backed MYNDY model we've been testing over the last 4.5 years. And you log in, it's 10 minutes, and there's 3 sets. So what we call focus, shift, and energize. Focus is about setting your goal for the day. We joke that most people are like athletes running around on the field without a goal. They're exhausted and they don't know if they've won. And so we're really helping you practice intention. The second thing, shift, is related to the 3 mind movements we know your brain needs to create a flexible mindset. And why would you want a flexible mindset? Because it helps you shift, what we like to say, see your thoughts, not be them, so you can shift them if they don't serve you. And why that matters is because many of us are victim of our own thoughts. We're having a bad day and we're like, I'm sad. We help you identify the thought, I'm having sad thoughts, and then shift them into something more productive if that's what is going to serve you in that time. And sometimes, by the way, that I'm feeling sad thought is also productive. So that's okay too. And then the last piece is energize. So we always say in order to move your mind, you have to move your body. There's 4 things we find that most people today really struggle to do. So manage their sleep, move their body, take breaks, and manage their tech use. And so we basically have you set a goal around this every day. And again, all of this takes 10 minutes of your day. We text you to remind you about the program whenever you want to be texted. We remind you about your wellness goal every day. And then we've got tracking and metrics. So if you want to track yourself every week, we are tracking your effort against your outcomes. So the work you're doing against how you're feeling. And then we have accountability baked in. So we have the ability to invite your whole mental fitness group or team to join you in your journey. So you can invite your friends, coworkers, or even, somebody that you've met that also wants to work on their mental fitness, to track each other and cheer each other on. So that's kind of what we've built today. It's going to be available in the App Store. I think the other feature I should talk about that's really important is that we have 2-way texting involved in the program. So we just find that our members are really, really in love with the idea of being able to talk to a real human, ask them questions, and be cheered on authentically by somebody who's living and breathing. And so we have the ability to 2-way text. So when we send you a text message, you can always write back to us asking questions with comments, tweaks, feedback, anything. The team's always here to support you in your mental fitness journey.
What a big commitment you have decided to to walk through, because it's very complex. It's a lot, it's a lot of work. I can see all of you in this, but also the detachment of it. The detachment of this is necessary. We need this more than ever in our society. I have a person. So you mentioned the word sad. And so if I text you back and I say, or text whoever's behind the 2-way text, and I say, I am sad, does the app help me do exercises to kind of bring myself back to focus? Or if I need someone, then someone texts me back?
It's both. So the app, couple things. So one is,
Okay.
I just want to talk about like what emotions are to begin with, because this was super interesting to me when I was diving into the research on this stuff.
Thank you.
So there's a famous researcher named Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, and she talks about how emotions are made. That's the name of her book. And what she says is that emotions are essentially like predictive weather patterns, where whether we're consciously or subconsciously feeling something, she gives the example of you might see a light blue car pass by. And let's just say an old friend you're no longer in touch with had a light blue car. You might not even consciously realize it, but it may trigger sad feelings for you. And our feelings are incredibly useful as a data point. So you feel a little sad, and it's a great opportunity to go inward and say, where is this feeling coming from? Do I want to sit with it? Does it belong with me? You know, those days you just want to feel a little moody. It's like a rainy day.
Mhm.
You're feeling cozy. You want to put on some really sad music and just like let it rip, maybe cry, have a minute. But you also can appreciate those days where you don't know why you're feeling sad. And what they're starting to teach children how to do, we weren't taught how to do this in school, is really identify their feelings and then again, shift them by doing things if those feelings don't feel attached to an actual moment or thing in your life. So, what we would do in that case is one, our program is really here to help you again build awareness in that feeling and then shift it with some thought provoking exercises in what we call our slow movement, which is about shifting your perspective. And we, unfortunately, I always say we're non-clinical experts. So we're not here to help you identify the thing to change it, but we are here to support you in that feeling. So we'll, acknowledge it and say, I'm so sorry you're feeling that way. Is there anything we can do? Is there any research we can pull for you that's like, you're interested in learning when it comes to this emotion? Because the best takeaway for any of our members is to start to get curious about their mind, about their thoughts, about their feelings, and about how they're showing up for themselves within those two things in the terms of their behavior as a result. So that's really why we're here. Long-winded, but these things are complicated. So I always say it's like usually not one like tight answer.
Yeah, and thank you because in a way you have explained something that we think is shameful, or at least I see it that way. Like, oh, I'm sad, I'm sorry. Like I'm sorry, I'm so like we are sorry for feeling these feelings.
Totally. And I was having like 2 days ago, I was so down. And my mom and, I'm right now staying with my family. I'm in the middle of a move. And my mom and my sister and my dad and everyone's like, is there anything we can do? And when I was younger, it was like, let's like shake it out of me and make it go away. And, I'm like, there's been like a whole lot of hard things I'm dealing with. And I was like, I think I just need to be sad. And that's okay. And it persisted through yesterday. And today I woke up and I said, I think the feeling needs to be done now. So I woke up. It's my mom's birthday. I had a really wonderful, nutritious breakfast. So like normally you'd say like, oh, I should have half a bagel. I have metabolic issues, so I'm not allowed to eat like that. So I'm like, I'm gonna have a healthy breakfast. I did some work. I went on a run in the sunshine, right? I listened to my book on tape, which is what I love. And I moved myself through that. And so I think to your point, like, yeah, there tends to be a lot of shame in our society around these, what are perceived as negative feelings. They're all here for a purpose. They all help us process and acknowledge and move through things. And what's really dangerous is when you don't acknowledge the sadness, you push it down and it ends up growing or turning into some sort of physical issue because when we're sad or upset, we're holding our breath, as an example. And so honoring feelings and really like using them, I keep saying as a data point, like dancing with them a little bit. Like, why are you here? Is there anything that I want to express or that I'm missing in my life that I couldn't be addressing? Is like a really valuable, powerful, and simple tool that like I was never taught how to do as a kid. And now I do all the time.
Beautiful. Beautiful, Lissy. One more thing because we are about that time. You talk a lot about that you did include this, which is community. And you mentioned a lot the word tribal. And I was wondering if a lot of our things are inherent in our body, in our DNA, that we cannot control, right? And I think we have created a society, like you were saying, like go, 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 and busy, busy, busy. And it's better if you're busy. And it's not okay if you are calm, if you take 2 days to feel your sadness. And then the third day, you're like, okay, thank you, sadness. Now it's time to move on, And so if you want to say something about that, and also just any closing thoughts that you have and how people can find you. And
Yeah, of course. So I think when it comes to, and is the question really like about how you could like how to deal with this idea that society wants us to keep moving?
I think it's more of like almost like justifying our feelings and our need to not be busy.
Totally. So I think it's interesting because, like, if you talk to any of my friends, they tell you I'm one of the busiest people that they know.
I
And
believe that.
yeah, I think that what's so interesting is that everybody has a different capacity for the things that are in their life. There's a famous article by this guy named Tony Schwartz who started something called the Energy Project, and it's called Manage Your Energy, Not Your Time. Manage your energy, not your time. So the idea is that if I'm doing work on my taxes, that is not an equal hour of work to talking with you with your really thoughtful, imaginative questions. Like, I get energy from this, taxes drain me. So I might only be able to do 3 hours of taxes work a day, but I could do, 12 meetings back to back with people who light me up. So I think the first thing is like, there needs to be a healthy respect. And by the way, I find a lot of like, one, I schedule downtime, which is why I'm so busy because people want to hang out. And I have time scheduled in my week where if you catch me, like I've blocked the time to hang out alone or with my partner or with my family. So yeah, I can't hang out until the next week or the following week. And that is like disturbing for people, which is fascinating for me because I used to feel a lot of guilt over that, of protecting my time. And then there's like this like other side, which is like, okay, well, I'm not as busy and I want to be. Now, are you doing the things that fill you up? Because I always say, like, I feel very lucky it's taken me 36 years, but I'm living in like really true alignment with what I love and who I am. So, like, as much as possible, by the way, not perfect every day, but I'd say for the most part, very aligned. So that feels really good to me. And I think I felt more shame for being busy from other people who want me to slow down with them because it makes them feel more comfortable. Then there's like the actual slowing down piece, which is like, okay, well, for me, for a long time, I did feel guilt over sitting on the couch on a Saturday, sleeping in, taking 3 to 6 hours to paint or read a book. And our brains are pattern makers and repeaters. Our mindset is a filter for those patterns, meaning if you're used to a pattern of busy, slowing down is a challenge. If you're used to a pattern of not listening to what your thoughts say, when you start listening, you get a little scared. And also your thoughts get scared, so they tend to quiet. So whatever you're trying to do, whether you're trying to slow down or speed up in your life, because there's both of those, I think what's really important to realize is that like your job is to figure out what gives you energy and then how do you spend enough time giving your energy to that and then enough time replenishing yourself so that you can balance your time and what you need. And when it comes to sadness or these emotions that maybe feel more private, I think what's really important about that is like dealing with them however feels most true to you is important. So for some people, that means sharing them with others, including people at work. Like at work, I said, I'm just not feeling like myself because I wasn't. Like I identified the sad feeling, but like I didn't know why. And I didn't really feel like talking about why I was sad because I was just feeling a little down and depleted, right? But I felt like it was important to share that I wasn't doing my best because if I said something or I had an action on my face and I still wanted to be at work. So there's that. But I think communicating in a way that feels respectful of your own needs and the people around you matters because I'm always happy. So I know that when I show up and I'm not in as good of a mood, people think it's their fault or that whatever. So I think just over communicating sometimes can be meaningful. And then for final thoughts, I just want to thank you. I feel like this has been such a fun conversation and really different. I feel like you've taken the questions in like such unique and personal ways and made me think differently about my own life. So I really appreciate that. As far as where people can find me and MYNDY and the team. So you can find us on LinkedIn, MYNDY. So speaking of unique names, people call us Mindy, we're MYNDY. So you can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us at www.mindy.co. And you can also find us, you'll be able to find us in a couple weeks on the App Store. So check us out. We're so excited to engage with you. You'll see we have some live sessions with the team. We'd love you to join. And then you can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Lissy, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
It was very, you gave me a lot of knowledge and a lot of freedom. Yeah. To feel and to feel and express my feelings. Thank you.
Of
Talk
course.
soon. Besitos.
Okay. Bye.